The remake of Resident Evil on the GameCube was and still is a beloved entry in the series, some stating that it's not only one of the best Resident Evil games out there, but arguably the single best remake of all time, even to this day. Even though it was only a 6-year gap between the PlayStation original and the remake, it was absolutely impressive with what they were able to produce here to justify a remake being needed at all. But the main problem with it at the time was that it was part of an exclusivity agreement that Capcom had with Nintendo to keep this remake on the GameCube only. And, well, the GameCube was definitely not seen as the top-selling system in the 6th generation. The PlayStation 2 sold more than 7 times the amount of systems that the GameCube did, absolutely crushing the competition back then. So this M-rated game on the GameCube, while universally praised, wasn't really finding the right audience in order to produce high sales numbers. But it wasn't the only game that was part of this exclusive agreement. Ports of Resident Evil 2, 3, and Code Veronica X were also released to the GameCube throughout 2003, as well as 2 completely new mainline entries, a prequel to Resident Evil, and even further down the line, the eventual release of Resident Evil 4. Development for this prequel began all the way back in 1998 to be released for the Nintendo 64, and I feel like I've been bringing this up in almost every video in this retrospective since then. But it's simply to hammer home that this game had been in the public consciousness for quite a while now, and it was finally time to have it be available. The idea of a prequel, or a story that precedes that of a previously established work, was certainly not a new concept at the time. There were plenty of movies and video games that were prequels. I mean, most of the Castlevania releases at the time take place before the original. But prequels were kind of seeing a renaissance at this time. 1999 saw Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace, telling the story of Anakin Skywalker when he was a child, way before he became Darth Vader. And then May of 2002 was Episode 2: Attack of the Clones, continuing the story of Anakin and Obi-Wan. However you feel about these films, they were monster successes in the box office. Another prequel to a popular horror film was also released in 2002 of Red Dragon, telling an early story of Hannibal Lecter in the 80s before Hannibal and the Silence of the Lambs. And 2002 had yet another prequel even, this time to The Mummy with The Scorpion King. All 3 of these being huge box office successes. So the idea of prequels were in the public eye at the time, and Resident Evil was the next IP to throw its head into the prequel ring, just in video game form. As I said, Resident Evil 0 was originally intended to be a Nintendo 64 release, and they had quite a bit of it finished at the time. It was being made in-house by Capcom Production Studios 3, and development kept hitting roadblocks with storage issues especially. The Nintendo 64 cartridges simply weren't powerful enough to hold the game that they wanted to release. I mentioned back in the RE2 video that it was impressive that they were able to fit that entire game on an N64 cartridge back then, but the industry was changing. Nintendo released the successor to the Nintendo 64 in 2001 with the GameCube, which was much more powerful than the N64, as seen with what they pulled off with the remake of RE1. So development for the prequel shifted to the GameCube to utilize the disc format with a projected release of late 2001. Noboru Sugimura was brought back to touch up the story, a now veteran writer of the series, alongside Hiromichi Nakamoto and Junichi Miyashita. There was yet another new director at the helm here of Koji Oda, who had been a system planner on the original Resident Evil. Shinji Mikami was still involved, but now more so with the trajectory and decisions of the franchise rather than in-game stuff. So after years of development and multiple delays, Resident Evil 0 was officially announced at E3 in 2002 for an autumn 2002 release date, about 8 months after the release of the Resident Evil remake. And thus, that is what happened with its North American release on November 12th, 2002, then in Japan 9 days later on November 21st, in Australia in February of 2003, and then Europe in March of 2003. Yeah, a bit of a different release order than usual there. So the main question is, how exactly would they go about telling a prequel to Resident Evil? Would it take place just before RE1 and deal with Bravo Team being lost in Raccoon Forest just before Alpha Team shows up to investigate? Or would they go way back in the past to tell the origins of the Umbrella Corporation and its founders? Will it be about Chris Redfield being a slave with his mother in the desert before Wesker shows up to free him and train him to be a STARS member? Let's find out, right after we check out the box art and manual. Since the North American release came first, this box art shows a woman and a man standing with guns in their hands in front of a table with a disheveled tablecloth on the carpeted floor. It's not clear where they are, or who the man specifically is, but he has slicked back hair and a tattoo on display along his entire arm, and is wearing a dark gray tank top. The woman is somebody we know though, STARS member Rebecca Chambers of the Bravo team that we met in Resident Evil 1, the original and the remake, so she ended up being in both 2002 releases. Interesting choice to feature her here. In the original RE1 video, I mentioned that I found it notable that during the absolutely amazing cast introductions that I will never grow tired of, she is the only Bravo member who gets a mention there. Throughout your journey, you will encounter her from time to time, but only if you're playing through Chris's campaign. She is the field medic for STARS and is only 18 years old and ends up being the sole survivor of the Bravo team by the end. So this makes her third appearance in a game. If you don't count that picture of her you find in Wesker's desk in RE2. What a stand-up guy. She also gets a bit more of a backstory in the S.D. Perry novels, and is even featured on the cover for the second book, Caliban Cove. So, okay, I guess we're telling her story here before the events of RE1 in the Spencer Mansion. So let's see what we get in the trusty old instruction manual. 1998. Several unusual murder cases had occurred in Raccoon City, a suburb in the Midwest. Gravely, Raccoon City police reviewed reports of groups of people-eating monsters attacking civilians' houses. The order came down: send in the elite STARS team to investigate. The STARS Bravo team went in first. Unfortunately, due to inexplicable engine trouble, they had to make an emergency landing. They touched down in a dense, dark forest. This was the beginning of the nightmare. So really, it pretty much has the same intro that RE1 had, nothing really new to learn there. We saw the Bravo helicopter down in the forest, so it's pretty clear now that this game takes place not long before RE1. We also learn what STARS is here again, nothing new to us, but they are the Special Tactics and Rescue Service, an elite unit assigned to special missions and are composed of two teams, Alpha Team and Bravo Team, and then two character introductions. Rebecca Chambers is the newest member of STARS Bravo Team. She is a gifted woman who sped through school and graduated from her university at the age of 18. A highly organized agent, Rebecca knows how to control a situation without letting it control her. And to no surprise, she looks great here graphically, and in line with her design in the RE1 remake. But who is the guy on the cover? Well, his name is Billy Cohen. Convicted on circumstantial evidence, this ex-Marine was sentenced to death for the murder of 23 people. On the way to his execution, the transport he was riding in crashed and he escaped. While on the run, he bumps into Rebecca. So, judging by this alone, it's not clear whether he will be an ally to Rebecca or her main enemy here. Convicted on circumstantial evidence is pretty vague sounding, so who knows. What we do know is that 23 people were murdered and now he will be somewhere around the forest area. And he does not appear in RE1. Alright, I say it's about time we see what this game is all about. Let's do this.
Resident Evil 0. A Midwestern town in America, Raccoon City. A solitary island far off in the sea, Rockfort Island. An island that would become the second Raccoon City, Sheena Island. There are still many unanswered questions about these seemingly unrelated yet intensely traumatic events. Though it is believed that the international enterprise umbrella was somehow involved, little is known as to the origin of this faceless corporation. When was it established? By whom? And how was the T-virus created? To uncover the truth, we must delve deeper into the events which transpired in the beginning, before the mansion incident.
We left him in.
Really?
Do you think so too?
Yeah.
Do about it.
Should hold off for a while.
But I wonder how those R&D people would react to this.
It began as a simple investigation of some bizarre murders in the suburbs of Raccoon City. Nothing in our training could ever have prepared us for the nightmare that ensued. We never stood a chance.
What's going on? Engine failure. Emergency landing.
Check the current position and investigate the surrounding area.
Captain, look! Captain!
What happened?
Court order for transportation. Prisoner Billy Cohen, ex-lieutenant, 26 years old. Court-martialed and sentenced to death July 22nd. Prisoner is to be transferred to the Regathon base for execution.
Those poor soldiers. They were good men just doing their jobs, and that scum murdered them and escaped.
All right, everyone, let's separate and survey the area. Our friend is brutal and ruthless. Keep your guard up.
A train?
Wow, well, there's a lot to break down here. First, I love the in-depth look at the casual conversation here.
Do you think so too?
Yeah.
It's like something an extra in a movie would say when they're told to converse with someone in the background. But then the passengers on the train all get attacked by leeches or something while a man from a Final Fantasy game sings on a hilltop wearing a flowing white cape. Yeah, is this the right game? Then it does actually cut to the Bravo team in their helicopter with some narration by Rebecca, and it's really cool to see everyone together. In RE1, they're all either dead before the game starts or about to die, so you actually get to see them interact here.
Check the current position and investigate the surrounding area.
Also, is that voice Enrico's?
Yeah?
There's the captain, Enrico Marini, communications officer Richard Aiken, scientific weapons specialist Kenneth J. Sullivan, counter-hacker Forrest Spire, flight navigator Edward Dewey, and helicopter pilot Kevin Dooley. The helicopter has...
another happy landing.
They find some dead bodies with goo around it and a court order for transportation for Billy Cohen, who is set to be put to death. Rebecca then explores on her own and finds a train. I wish this is how the game started, instead of showing the leeches on a train thing though. You should be discovering the story right alongside Rebecca, and now you know more than she does. It's still a huge mystery anyway, but whatever. Then the game actually begins when you enter the train, now controlling Rebecca Chambers. It definitely feels very similar to the RE1 intro, which makes sense. The Bravo team was sent to investigate the murders in the forest via helicopter, and then Alpha team was sent to investigate the missing Bravo team, so it's a nice parallel. The train is dark, deserted, and quiet, with only the sound of rain outside. It has a pretty great atmosphere to it, I gotta say. Rebecca gets sandwiched between zombies approaching her, and then the exact same gameplay as RE1 Remake commences. Tank controls, fixed camera angles, inventory management, door opening, load screens. I don't need to repeat myself here at this point. Resident Evil 0 is still classic RE. As you continue your solo investigation, Rebecca encounters the Billy Cohen, who traps her at gunpoint. She plays it pretty cool, and once Billy realizes she's with stars, he just tries to leave. She tells him he's under arrest, and because she's an 18-year-old girl, he doesn't take her seriously and just walks away, not before showing that he already has handcuffs on. Just then, Edward Dewey flies in through the window and with a dying breath tells Rebecca that the forest is full of zombies and monsters.
Zombies and monsters.
Yes, zombies and monsters. Then, in classic RE fashion, two zombie dogs also burst through to attack Rebecca. A couple train cars over, Enrico radios in to Rebecca to tell her that Billy was institutionalized for murdering 23 people and to be very careful. So, just like that, one STARS member is down, and Rebecca now has to worry about zombies, zombie dogs, and a fugitive on the loose. What a day, am I right? But right away, Billy finds Rebecca again and throws out the idea of cooperating together, since they stand a better chance together than separate.
Listen, little girl, if you haven't noticed, there's some pretty freaked out things on this train. And I, for one, want to get out of here. I don't think we stand a chance doing it alone.
You expect me to trust you, a wanted felon? I don't need your help. I can handle this on my own. And don't call me little girl.
Rebecca takes offense to him talking about her, but he says he'll stay back while she goes upstairs to investigate. At the top of the stairs, she sees an old man sitting with his head down in a pretty gruesome scene after gently shaking him. His head just falls right off onto the ground as leeches spill out from inside of his corpse, and collectively fuse together to create a zombie? Wait, these can't be what the zombies are made of, right? It's the T-virus that infected real people. Where are these leeches coming from? The leeches then split off from the zombie and start to engulf Rebecca, but Billy of all people saves her, complete with a super cool diving move to shoot a couple airborne leeches. Then they just kinda slither away. They then hear some falsetto singing outside as we once again see the man with the white cape and long hair commanding the leeches to come to him. What is even going on here? Billy again tells her they must cooperate in order to survive, and Rebecca agrees, but not before telling him that she will shoot him if he tries anything. And thus, the brand new gimmick of the game is finally revealed. In Resident Evil 1 and 2, you were given the option of two characters to play through the game. In 3, you were only given the option of Jill. In Code Veronica, you were also only given the option of Claire, but Chris was also playable in a good amount of the second half. So this time, you think you're only given the option of Rebecca at first, but actually you play through the rest of the duration as both Rebecca and Billy. You control either one of them at any time, while the other either follows behind you or stays put at your command. You also choose for them to either be idle or to attack if they are following you. But if you have them set to attack, they will use up ammo in their inventory. Because yes, inventory management operates the same here, and both Rebecca and Billy each have 6 slots. So a large aspect of the game is choosing which character you want to control and where to go, and if you want the other to stay behind or not. You can switch at any moment, but obviously you can only control one at a time. So if you keep one behind to do something, they are going to just stand there. In a way, it can be a bit of a puzzle in its own right. If either of them dies, it is a game over, so it's not like you can continue on with only one of them. And Rebecca and Billy do operate a bit differently, so it's not like choosing who goes where won't matter. Rebecca is the STARS field medic, so naturally she specializes in herbal medicine. Billy is not able to mix herbs at all. Instead, he is able to take more damage than Rebecca before dying, similar to Chris versus Jill in RE1. And then the rest of the game continues on, all leading up to the events of Alpha Team's helicopter arriving to the forest. Pretty much all the rest of the gameplay is the same as in the RE1 remake, with some differences. There are similar weapons, herbs, and first aid sprays, ink ribbons, puzzle items, yeah, you know the drill. But the second biggest change after the controlling two-player system is that they chose to eliminate the item box here. The item box has been around since the beginning, acting as your place to store weapons and items that you don't want to carry with you. Limited inventory space is all part of the experience, so the item box is typically something you will come back to many, many times. And sure, it didn't make any sense that the items teleport between item boxes, as any item box allows you to access all of your stuff. So this game tries to add a bit more realism to this concept. Teleporting items are no longer a thing here, and instead you just drop things onto the ground where you want. Your map will tell you where things are, so you don't have to memorize every single dropped item, but you are highly encouraged to keep your stuff accessible in case you end up needing something later on. Large hub rooms are a much better place to drop stuff rather than small dead-end rooms, unless you don't have much of a choice. It does add another layer of strategy to the game, for better or for worse, depending on your perspective of it. However you feel about it, it does add more realism to this story about, zombies and leeches. And really, that's about it. Per usual, I won't explain the entire story here, as things go in some crazy directions. There are a nice mix of new and familiar enemies too. Zombies, dogs, crows, spiders, and hunters make their return here, and there are now zombie monkeys known as eliminators, and frogs known as lurkers. But the leeches and leech men are the new main focus here, as seen in the intro and train segment. I ultimately have mixed feelings on these things. As for me and my experience with the game, I was a junior in high school when it came out, and I was way too lazy at the time to get a job. I did get my first job the following year, but anyway, I didn't have the money to purchase this new game. I was a very recent fan of the series, having loved going through the RE1 remake, so I was really excited to try it out, maybe as a blockbuster rental. But my brother, being 9 years older than me, already had an established career, so he did go purchase it close to day one and let me borrow it, making this my third actual Resident Evil experience. I specifically remember being homesick from school one day and pretty much just blasting through the entire thing in like a day or two. I know he wanted to get to play it too, so I figured I'd beat it as quickly as possible and give it back to him. And I really did enjoy it a lot. The whole idea of omitting the item box and leaving items laying around was an excellent idea for me at the time. It made much more logical sense than this magical box that can teleport your items for you. Looking back on it now, yeah, I have mixed feelings on it, like most people do. But really, that was about it for my RE0 experience for quite some time. The whole thing lasted like 2 days for me, and then I didn't play it again until years later. It's possible that I borrowed my brother's copy again at some point, but I didn't actually get to own it until sometime in the early to mid 2010s. My second or third time playing through it though, I really did start to see the problems more clearly. I really thought I was going to love it again since I was able to look back on it fondly from 2002. I was excited to see the zombie monkeys again, until I wasn't. Those things are annoying. I was looking forward to using the partner system and dropping items on the ground and remembering the story, until it didn't hit the same way. Rebecca honestly feels like a completely different character here than in RE1 too. After everything she goes through in this game, she chooses not to convey really any of this to Chris and instead just feels as lost as he does in that game. This is a prequel taking place hours before RE1, so that really starts to feel sloppy the more you think about it. This is a cool portrayal of Rebecca and all, but things don't line up too well if you think of it as one whole story, and that is a problem. For me, Resident Evil 0 is one of those games that I would have been much more positive on had I'd only played it the one time after its release. It seems to be less and less enjoyable for me every time I go through it, and it kinda makes me not really want to play it. I definitely don't hate it. It has a lot of positives going for it too. It looks amazing graphically and is pretty much on par with the RE1 remake. The train segment is very well done too. I also think it's really cool to see the perspective of the events from a minor character that you don't even play as in the original games, and you get to learn more about what Umbrella was really doing. It's just, as a game, it can often be more frustrating than fun or scary. Of the main games thus far, it honestly is my least favorite, just slightly below Code Veronica. And just like with a Resident Evil remake, this game certainly did not stay exclusive to the GameCube, although it was for a number of years. It eventually got a release for the Nintendo Wii in 2008 in Japan, 2009 in North America, and 2010 in Europe and Australia under the title Resident Evil Archives, along with the RE1 remake. This version allowed use of the Wiimote and Nunchuck as a secondary control option to the standard GameCube controller, although motion controls were not utilized, which is what the Wii is known for. Then, in 2015, it was announced that Capcom was going to release an HD version of Resident Evil 0. Even though the game looked great as it was on the GameCube, there was still room for graphical improvement, and a lot of the character models, backgrounds, and textures were touched up to look cleaner and even better, also alongside the Resident Evil 1 remake. These two games are very often seen as a pairing, specifically in an actual paired release called Resident Evil Origins Collection. And so, Resident Evil 0 HD Remaster was released in early 2016 for the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PC. What once was a Nintendo-only experience was now available on any major modern console, now almost 14 years after its original release. And it was yet again re-released on the Nintendo Switch in 2019. The HD versions also included a Wesker mode, where you get to play as Albert Wesker and can use his enhanced abilities. Because as far as the critical reception for the OG GameCube version went, Resident Evil 0 was honestly pretty well received with a pretty decent grade range of B to A. It was one of the best looking video games you could see at the time and is still pretty impressive for it being 2002. A lot of fans and critics praised the partner system and concept of eliminating the item boxes, but it did lead to a lot of time-wasting backtracking. Reception has kinda cooled on this game over the years, which really does mirror my own experience with it too. It was likely at its best in 2002. Just like with the Star Wars prequels, a lot of continuity issues start to arise the more you think about things. It goes in some unexpected directions. Sales-wise, it did sell just slightly less than the RE1 remake did on the GameCube, which was already unfortunately too low for how good that game was. Resident Evil 0 stands as the 28th best-selling GameCube game at about 1.25 million sales, still quite a bit lower than the successes of the original PlayStation trilogy. Of the million-plus sellers on the GameCube, Resident Evil games were the only M-rated ones on the entire list, so it was still struggling to bring in the same kind of numbers. 2002 also saw the release of another M-rated horror game on the GameCube of an absolutely beloved hidden gem, Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. This game received universal praise and is considered one of the best horror games of all time, but it remained a GameCube exclusive and only sold less than 500,000 copies. It was a weird time for the GameCube then, with some absolute banger releases, yet everyone was flocking to the PlayStation 2. I also love Eternal Darkness, by the way. That's an absolute must for horror fans. It also should be noted that S.D. Perry's 7th and final Resident Evil novel was a novelization of RE0 entitled Resident Evil 0 Hour, released in late 2004. I haven't read this one quite yet, but I will eventually. I do enjoy her book series. But things are actually going to be shifting away from Nintendo for the next release as we enter 2003. Well, after the ports of Resident Evil 2 and 3 for the GameCube in January of 2003. But after that, we are going to be looking at another very strange entry that not many people seem to talk about. It's a completely new side story that is surprisingly a sequel to Survivor 2 Code Veronica. I must clarify that I say sequel in quotes though. This is the third entry in the Gun Survivor series that remains a PlayStation 2 exclusive, so it must have sold a ton of copies, right? Join me next time as we look at Resident Evil Dead Aim. Paraspectre will return.
Edward! Are you alright? What happened?
Zombies and monsters.
This is Rebecca. Over. And don't call me little girl.
That's irrelevant. We must make sure no knowledge of this gets out.
Don't screw up, okay?
I won't.
The first general manager.
What about the mail?
It was I who scattered the T-virus in the mansion.
I'm almost there.
I'm glad I could be of service. Time to go inside.
And I am very territorial.
You can't be serious. I refuse to abandon my work. Something must be done about that madman.
can't. Hold on.
I'll pull you up.
I'll continue to search for him. Over. I'm not going to judge you. It was those zombie dogs, right? When they attacked the van...
That guy could be Marcus's son. Or grandson.
That guy must be Marcus's son. Or grandson.
That's unfortunate. He won't make it. Come on, let's go.
I never saw him again.
Revenge on Umbrella.